Thank you, Chair. While it seems there to be general consensus that systemic racism exists in Canada, there's been much recent debate about what it means. Can the government please tell this committee how it defines systemic and provide specific examples of policy and legislative initiatives that are underway or being considered?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I'd like to thank the member for the question. Systemic racism, systemic discrimination exists within our institutions, and that's why it's important that the decision-making table actually reflect the diversity of our country. That's why we've brought forward a new appointments process. That's exactly why we have an opportunity right now to ensure that the programs and policies we put in place are informed by lived experiences. These are the measures we're going to put forward. We have an anti-racism secretariat as well as an anti-racism strategy that was created by Canadians for Canadians, and we look forward to working together with allies in all parties. Thank you.
Ms. Wilson-Raybould.
Well, I didn't hear a specific definition of systemic racism there, but I'll move to my next question. With respect to Indigenous peoples, would the government agree that the Indian Act is one of, if not the most egregious examples of systemic racism in Canada, and in particular sections 5 through 17, where the Crown is still legislating and determining who is legally an Indian, and sections 74 through 80, where the Crown is still legislating how those people so defined govern themselves? Would the government not agree that these are both examples of systemic racism?
Honourable Minister.
I also thank the member for the question, and I do believe that our government is working very hard to get people out of that colonial piece of legislation, the Indian Act. The more we work together on that path of self-determination and of rights recognition, where nations will determine who are their members, and that indeed is one way out of the systemic racism that is faced in Indigenous people coast to coast to coast.
Raybould.
Thank you. I'm not sure if I heard agreement with my question, but surely it is the height of racism where one group of peoples tells another who they are and how they make decisions about themselves. Does the minister agree that the determination of who is an Indigenous person and how they govern themselves and make internal decisions should be an exclusive power of a recognized Indigenous peoples?
The Honourable Minister.
I think that the member and I totally agree on this, that again, as we move to self-determination where nations will determine who are their members, we have really no right as a country to be telling nations who and who are not their members. That is why in the future we hope that the Indian Registrar position would no longer be necessary, as all nations in Canada are able to determine who and who is not a member of their nation.
Ms. Wilson-Raybould.
Thank you. So just to clarify and to be certain, does the minister agree that these powers of governance should be the exclusive powers for recognized Indigenous peoples?
Minister.
I think that is everything we're working towards as we build and nation rebuilding in the rights recognition, as nations come together to determine who is the nation and who are their members. That is the work that we're supporting coast to coast to coast.
Thank you.
My job is to accelerate that progress.
Wilson-Raybould.
Thank you, Chair. This government has stated numerous times that they are committed to advancing sentencing reform that will, quote, stand the test of time. They also state, quote, they are committed to addressing the tragic problem of overrepresentation of Indigenous peoples and marginalized Canadians while holding offenders to account and protecting victims. I think that most members in this House would agree that the time for empty promises is over and action is required. Evidence clearly shows that mandatory minimum penalties are a big part of the problem and not smart justice policy. There has been enough study and there has been too much delay due to political expediency. When will the government confirm that it will repeal mandatory minimum penalties for all but most of the serious of offences?
Well, Minister.
Madam Speaker, I thank the honourable member for the question. We, as always, are very concerned with the the tragedy, if you will, Madam Speaker, of overrepresentation of Indigenous peoples in our criminal justice system and in incarceration. We have described it as a national shame, Madam Speaker. So we understand that. We are working on a number of different fronts in order to reduce that. And it includes continually looking at the criminal code and seeing where reform is possible, and that includes sentencing reform.